Domestic threats were the main problems Elizabeth faced upon accession in 1558. How far do you agree? Explain your answer. You may use the following in your answer: poverty, Calais. You must also use information of your own. 16 marks. Here is the mark scheme for this question, which you can find out about in more detail in our overview video. 10 marks are awarded for AO2, which is your analysis and evaluation of a second-order historical concept. So for this question, you need to decide for yourself what you think that is. Here we're dealing with significance, so we're thinking, what was the most significant problem that Elizabeth faced in 1558? Was it a domestic threat? Do you agree with the question? If you disagree, was there a factor that was more significant? It doesn't really matter what you argue, as long as you can explain why you think what you think. That brings us on to AO1, which is worth 6 marks. That's for your knowledge and understanding of the period. So, to explain your thinking, you need to bring in evidence from your own knowledge. These are the bottom 2 bands for this question. If you're scoring in these 2 bands, it might mean that the way that you answer the question needs a little bit more development. So you might need to be bringing in more evidence from your own knowledge. You might need to be linking your points back to the question. Or it might be that the examiner doesn't quite know what you're trying to argue, so maybe you need a clearer argument. These are the top 2 bands. If you're scoring in these bands, it means that you've identified the second order concept and made a judgment. You've then supported that with relevant evidence and come to a justified conclusion. Your structure is clear, the examiner knows exactly what you're trying to argue. Overall, you've demonstrated a really good understanding of the topic and the question. There are lots of different points you could have made when answering this question, so as long as what you say is relevant and correct, the examiner will accept it. But here are some examples of points that you could have included. It's a good idea with these longer questions to use the point, evidence, explain structure. So, for example, if you decided to support the statement, you could make a point that the religious settlement posed a domestic threat to Elizabeth. Your evidence could be the act of supremacy because that required loyalty to Elizabeth rather than the Pope. And then to explain that, you can say that that upset many Catholics and that potentially that posed a threat of rebellion. So you can see that that's a really nicely developed point which shows a really good understanding of the topic and shows that I've analysed the question, thought about that second order concept, and it's that kind of evidence that the examiner needs to score you in the top bands. Have a look through the rest of the points and see if there's anything else you could have added to your answer.